Why were the vexorns circling her instead of me? Doctor. Keira Volsen froze mid-step as she entered the biodome observation deck, her platinum hair catching the artificial sunlight streaming through the reinforced glass. The small crystalline cub sat in the center of the floor, frantically tugging at the regeneration bandage wrapped around its translucent foreleg, while 7 adult vexorns, each the size of a small bear with shimmering scales that refracted light into rainbow patterns, formed a tight protective circle around the alien veterinarian. Their multifaceted eyes weren't hostile, but they weren't letting her through either. Keira's pointed ears twitched as she picked up the low harmonic hum the creatures made when distressed, a sound that vibrated through her chest like a second heartbeat. She'd been working on Outpost Meridian for 3 months now, studying Earth's first contact with indigenous alien fauna, and she'd never seen the vexorns behave like this. The cub whimpered, a sound like wind chimes breaking, and one of the adults shifted its massive body toward her, then deliberately looked past her to the doorway behind. They were waiting for someone. They were waiting for him. Don't move. The voice came from behind her, low and steady, carrying that infuriating calm that made her both frustrated and inexplicably safe. Marcus Chen stepped into the biodome, his worn field jacket bearing the stains of a dozen different alien ecosystems. His dark eyes already assessing the situation with the focused intensity she'd come to recognize over the past weeks. He wasn't a scientist, wasn't even supposed to be on this research station. He was just a cargo pilot who'd gotten stranded here after his ship needed repairs. But somehow, inexplicably, every creature on this moon gravitated toward him like he was speaking a language the rest of them couldn't hear. Keira had 3 advanced degrees in xenobiology, could recite the anatomical structure of 47 alien species from memory, and had pioneered new surgical techniques for cross-species treatment. Yet here she stood, blocked by her own patients, while they waited for a man whose only qualification was what? A gentle touch. It should have made her furious. Instead, she found herself stepping aside, watching as Marcus moved past her with fluid grace, and hating how her breath caught slightly when his arm brushed hers. The vexorns parted immediately. Marcus knelt slowly in the center of the circle, and Keira could see the tension leave the adult creatures' bodies, their humming shifting to a lower, more peaceful frequency. The cub looked up at him with those kaleidoscope eyes, and immediately stopped tugging at the bandage, instead pressing its small head against Marcus's outstretched hand. "Hey there, little one," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "That itches, doesn't it? I know, but we need to keep it on just a bit longer." Keira watched, fascinated despite herself, as Marcus's fingers traced the edge of the regeneration wrap with practiced care. The cub settled, its distress chiming fading to soft melodic notes. How was he doing this? She'd spent years studying animal behavior, alien psychology, interspecies communication protocols. Marcus had spent most of his life hauling cargo between stations, yet here he was, communicating with an alien species they'd only discovered 6 months ago, as if they were old friends. One of the adult vexorns moved closer to her, and Keira stiffened, but the creature simply lowered its massive head and gently bumped her leg, not aggressive, but insistent. It wanted her to come closer. It wanted her to watch. She knelt beside Marcus, acutely aware of the warmth radiating from his body in the cool biodome air. "The bandage is secure," she said quietly, pulling her medical scanner from her belt. "The regeneration matrix should have the fracture healed within another 48 hours. But he keeps pulling at it." Marcus glanced at her, and she caught something in his expression, not judgment, but a kind of patient waiting, like he was hoping she'd figure it out herself. It made her feel like a student again, uncertain and seeking approval. And she absolutely hated that feeling. "Run your scanner over his shoulder," Marcus said finally. "The injured leg isn't what's bothering him." Keira frowned, but complied, moving the device over the cub's body. "There's slight inflammation in the shoulder joint, probably from compensating for the injured foreleg. Not serious, not even painful enough to show obvious symptoms, but uncomfortable. A persistent itch." She'd missed it in her initial examination because she'd been focused on the primary injury. The realization stung more than it should have. "I can adjust the bandage to include a topical analgesic for the shoulder," she said, already reaching into her medical kit. The cub watched her with those mesmerizing eyes, and she found herself slowing her movements, gentling her approach, mimicking the way Marcus moved, careful, deliberate, respectful. She'd always been efficient in her treatments, priding herself on speed and precision, But maybe that wasn't what these creatures needed. Maybe they needed to be seen, not just healed. She applied the medication with steady hands, and the cub's eyes half closed in relief, a soft purring hum emanating from its chest. When she finished, the small creature did something unexpected. It pressed its head against her palm the same way it had with Marcus. The touch sent a slight electric tingle through her skin, the vexorn's natural bioelectric field, creating a gentle buzz of connection. Keira's breath caught. In 3 months of working with these creatures, not one had initiated contact with her. They'd tolerated her examinations, accepted her treatments, but always at a distance. Always with Marcus as the intermediary. This felt different. This felt like trust. "They've been waiting for you to slow down," Marcus said softly, and she turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're brilliant, Keira. Everyone on this station knows it. But brilliance moves fast, and the vexorns, they need you to move at their speed, not yours." It wasn't a criticism. Not exactly, but it cut deep anyway. She'd built her entire career on being the best, the fastest, the one who could solve problems others couldn't. On her home planet of Thessia 4, her hybrid human-Thessian heritage had made her an outsider, too alien for the humans, too human for the Thessians. She'd compensated by being indispensable, by making sure her skills spoke louder than her pointed ears or her luminescent skin. But here, in this biodome, with these gentle creatures and this impossible human man, maybe being the best wasn't enough. Maybe being present was what mattered. The adult vexorns began to disperse, their humming settling into a contented chorus that echoed softly through the dome. The cub curled up between Marcus and Keira, apparently deciding they made an acceptable resting spot. Keira found herself sitting on the floor fully now, her tactical pants picking up dust she'd normally be annoyed about, but somehow it didn't matter. Marcus shifted to sit more comfortably, his shoulder now touching hers, and neither of them moved away. "How did you learn this?" she asked finally, the question she'd been holding back for weeks. "I've studied interspecies communication, xenopsychology, behavioral patterns. I should understand this. But you," she trailed off, frustrated by her own inadequacy with words. Communication was supposed to be her strength. Yet she couldn't articulate this strange feeling of being completely competent and utterly lost at the same time. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently stroking the cub's crystalline back. "I grew up on a colony ship," he said finally. 17 years in transit to a planet that turned out to be uninhabitable. When we arrived, the whole colony fell apart, people panicking, fighting over resources, blaming the scouts who'd gotten the initial data wrong. My parents were part of the maintenance crew, and they taught me that when everything's chaos, you don't think faster or shout louder. You slow down, you pay attention, you find what's actually wrong instead of what you assume is wrong. He glanced at her, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You would have hated me back then. I barely finished basic education. Spent most of my time in the hydroponics bay with the plants and the recycler rats. Couldn't tell you the scientific name for anything. But I could tell you which plants were stressed by the light cycle and which rats were sick just by watching them." "You're wrong," Keira said quietly, surprising herself. "I wouldn't have hated you. I would have been jealous." The admission felt dangerous, like showing him a wound she usually kept bandaged. "I've always known what to do, but I've never really known how to just be with people, with anything that can't be solved by data and protocols." She looked down at the cub sleeping between them. "On Thessia 4, I had 2 colleagues who committed suicide during my residency. The pressure, the competition, the constant need to be exceptional, it broke them. I watched it happen, and I didn't know how to help because I was too busy trying to stay ahead myself. I told myself I was focused, dedicated, but maybe I was just scared. Scared that if I slowed down, I'd realize I didn't actually know what I was doing." Marcus's hand found hers, his fingers threading through hers with the same gentle certainty he showed with the vexorns. The touch sent a different kind of electricity through her, wholly human and wholly unexpected. "You know exactly what you're doing, Keira," he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "You just saved this cub's life 3 days ago when everyone else said he couldn't be helped. You pioneered the regeneration matrix that's healing his leg right now. You've cataloged and treated 17 species on this moon that no one in human space has ever even seen before. You're not lost. You're just learning a new language, and you're picking it up faster than you think." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand. and she found herself leaning slightly closer, drawn by something she couldn't name and didn't want to analyze. The vexorns were never choosing me over you. They were waiting for you to choose yourself, to trust your instincts instead of your protocols. A soft alarm chimed from Keira's unit, breaking the moment. She reluctantly pulled her hand from Marcus's and checked the display. Incoming transport, she read, frowning. Station Director Yao wants us both in the command center immediately. Priority Alpha. That was odd. Priority Alpha meant potential danger, but all their perimeter sensors had been quiet. Marcus helped her to her feet carefully, making sure not to disturb the sleeping cub, and they headed toward the biodome exit. The adult vexorns watched them go, their crystalline bodies refracting the light into dancing patterns on the walls. And Keira could swear they looked satisfied, like they'd orchestrated this whole encounter. Ridiculous, of course. They were intelligent by Xenofauna standards, but they weren't capable of that kind of social manipulation. Were they? The command center was chaos when they arrived. Director Yao, a stern woman in her 60s with more combat medals than most military officers, stood at the central display, surrounded by frantic technicians. "We have a situation," she said without preamble, pulling up a holographic image. It showed a ship clearly not human in origin, its hull covered in the same crystalline patterns as the vexorns. "This vessel entered orbit 20 minutes ago. It's been transmitting on every frequency we have, and our translation AI finally cracked it. They're asking for their children back." The blood drained from Keira's face. The vexorns weren't indigenous to this moon. They were someone's lost children. "We found them in the southern continent," she said, her mind racing through implications. "Scattered. Some injured, the cub nearly dead. We assumed they were native fauna, but if they're actually colonists," Marcus finished, his voice grim. "Or maybe refugees. That ship's hull is damaged. Look at the aft section scoring consistent with weapons fire." He was right. Keira could see it now, the telltale marks of energy weapons across the crystalline surface. This wasn't a planned settlement. This was an emergency landing, and they'd lost their children in the chaos. "They're demanding we return the vexorns immediately," Director Yao said, her expression hard. "But there's a complication. Our medical scans of that ship show approximately 200 individuals on board, and at least half are showing signs of the same respiratory infection we detected in the adult vexorns when we first brought them in. We treated our vexorns, but if we return them to that ship without treating the others, they'll just get reinfected. And if that ship leaves orbit with that infection untreated, it could spread to wherever they're heading. So we need to offer to treat everyone on the ship," Keira said immediately. "Bring them down in quarantine groups, apply the treatment protocol I developed." "They're refusing," Yao interrupted. "They don't trust us. From their perspective, we kidnapped their children, and now we're trying to lure more of them down to the surface. They're giving us 6 hours to return the vexorns, or they'll take them by force." The threat hung in the air. The station had defensive capabilities, but this wasn't a military installation. If it came to conflict, people would die. And even if they won, they'd have started a war with a species they knew nothing about. Marcus stepped closer to the display, studying the ship with intense focus. "The vexorns trust me," he said slowly. "And they're starting to trust Keira. What if we could get them to vouch for us? Some species have telepathic or empathic abilities. If the vexorns could communicate our intentions, it's a massive risk," Yao said. "If you're wrong, if they can't communicate, or the ship doesn't believe them, you'd be caught in the middle when things turn violent." She looked between Marcus and Keira, her expression softening slightly. "I can't order you to do this. It has to be voluntary." Keira didn't hesitate. "I'm in. If there's any chance to resolve this peacefully and save those lives on the ship, we have to try." Marcus nodded agreement. And something passed between them, a shared understanding that this was bigger than their personal safety, bigger than the awkwardness of whatever was growing between them. This was what they were both here for. Him, with his instinctive connection to living things, her with her desperate need to heal and protect. Together, maybe they could bridge the gap between two species on the edge of catastrophe. 2 hours later, Keira stood in the biodome with Marcus at her side and all 8 vexorns arrayed before them. She'd brought her medical equipment, her research notes, everything she could think of to demonstrate their intentions. Marcus had suggested something simpler. "Just show them the truth," he'd said. Now, as the adult vexorns formed a circle around them, their humming rising in frequency and complexity, she understood what he meant. The cub approached first, its bandaged leg moving with much better flexibility now. It pressed its head against her hand, and this time the electric tingle intensified, spreading up her arm and into her chest. Images flickered through her mind, not words, but feelings and sensations. The terror of being separated from family, the pain of injury, the careful, gentle touch of healing hands, relief, growing trust, hope. The adult vexorns joined the connection one by one, and suddenly Keira was drowning in a flood of shared consciousness. She felt Marcus's hand grip hers, anchoring her, and realized he was experiencing it too. She thought of the ship in orbit, deliberately projecting her concern for the sick vexorns aboard. She visualized her treatment protocol, the medicine that had healed the respiratory infection, her desire to help. The vexorns' collective presence in her mind swelled with understanding. And then something shifted. They were communicating with the ship. She could feel it, like a conversation happening in a language she couldn't speak, but could somehow comprehend. Questions from the ship: suspicion, fear, desperate love for the lost children. Answers from the vexorns: reassurance, explanation, trust earned through gentleness and healing. The Cub's simple, pure emotion: these ones are safe, these ones care. The connection lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When it finally released, Keira staggered, and Marcus caught her, his arms steady around her waist. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice shaky. Director Yao's voice crackled through their cum units. "I don't know what you did down there, but the ship just requested permission to send a medical delegation to the surface. They want to meet with Dr. Volsen specifically to discuss treatment protocols." Keira felt tears prick her eyes from relief, from exhaustion, from the overwhelming beauty of what had just happened. She'd connected with an alien species on a level she'd never imagined possible, had helped prevent a conflict that could have spiraled into tragedy. And she'd done it not through her brilliance or her degrees, but through simple presence and trust. "We should get to the landing bay," Marcus said softly, still holding her. "They'll be here soon." But neither of them moved immediately. In the gentle light of the biodome, surrounded by the peaceful humming of the vexorns, Keira looked up at Marcus and saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for teaching me to slow down." "Thank you," he replied, "for showing me that knowledge and instinct aren't opposites. We needed both to make this work." The next hours blurred into a flurry of medical consultations, careful diplomatic exchanges, and the profound satisfaction of watching her treatment protocol save lives on a scale she'd never achieved before. The vexorn delegation was cautious but gracious, their biomechanical translation devices rendering their crystalline chimes into comprehensible language. They explained that their colony ship had been attacked by raiders, forcing an emergency separation of their main vessel. The vexorns on the moon had been in an escape pod that crash-landed, scattering them across the southern continent. They'd searched desperately, but hadn't dared land their damaged ship until now, when their children confirmed it was safe. Keira worked alongside their medical specialists, sharing data and techniques, learning as much as she taught. These beings had medical knowledge that put human science to shame in some areas, yet they were fascinated by her regeneration matrix, adapted from 3 different species healing methodologies. By the time the last patient was treated and cleared, Keira had filled 2 data pads with notes and made what she suspected would become lifelong colleagues among the vexorn physicians. As the vexorns prepared to depart, the cub approached Keira one final time. Its bandage was gone now, the leg fully healed, and it moved with the joyful energy of healthy young creatures everywhere. It pressed its head against her palm, and she felt a simple message of gratitude and affection that needed no words. "You're welcome, little one," she murmured. "Stay safe out there." The cub chirped melodically, then bounded toward its parents, who waited at the landing bay entrance. The adult vexorns each acknowledged her in turn, their bioelectric touches, carrying nuances of respect and friendship that made her chest tight with emotion. The lead vexorn, whom she'd learned was the colony's primary healer, spoke through the translation device. "You have given us back our future. Our children will remember the human who learned to listen and the Thessian who learned to trust. Should you ever need sanctuary, our settlement will welcome you." It was a formal declaration of alliance, she realized. A bond forged not through treaties or negotiations, but through genuine connection and mutual care. After the vexorn ship departed, the station slowly returned to normal operations. Keira stood in the observation deck, watching the stars and thinking about everything that had changed in the span of a single day. She heard footsteps behind her and knew without turning that it was Marcus. "Can't sleep?" he asked, coming to stand beside her at the window. "Too much in my head," she admitted. "I keep thinking about what the lead healer said, about learning to listen and learning to trust. I've spent my whole career thinking those were weaknesses, things that would slow me down or make me vulnerable. But today they saved lives." She turned to look at him, this impossible man who'd wandered into her life by accident and changed everything. "You saved lives," Marcus corrected gently. "I just helped you see what was already there." He reached out, tucking a strand of her platinum hair behind her pointed ear, his fingers lingering on her jaw. "For what it's worth, I think you're exactly who you're supposed to be. Brilliant and compassionate, fast when you need to be and patient when it matters. You don't have to choose one or the other." Keira leaned into his touch, feeling the last of her carefully constructed walls crumble. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed. "The career stuff I understand. Protocols and procedures and research, that's my language. But this?" She gestured between them, at the charged air and unspoken feelings. "I'm completely lost." Marcus smiled, that slow, warm expression that made her heart do complicated things. "Then maybe it's my turn to teach you about slowing down and trusting your instincts." He leaned closer, giving her every opportunity to pull away. And when she didn't, he kissed her with the same gentle certainty he brought to everything else. It was soft and sweet and perfect, a promise of possibility rather than a demand for certainty. When they finally pulled apart, Keira was smiling, really smiling, in a way she couldn't remember doing in years. "My instincts say this is a really good idea," she whispered. "See?" Marcus replied. "You're learning already." 3 months later, Keira stood in a newly established medical center on the Vexorn settlement world, surrounded by technology that represented a collaboration between 3 species worth of knowledge. Marcus was there too, of course, having officially joined the Xenofauna research team with the enthusiastic recommendation of every creature on Outpost Meridian. They were building something here, not just medical facilities, but bridges between worlds, understanding forged through patience and mutual respect. Sometimes, late at night, when the bioluminescent vexorn architecture glowed around them, Keira would remember that moment in the biodome when the cub tugged at its bandage and everything changed. She'd been so certain she knew her path, so focused on being the best, that she'd forgotten to be present. It had taken an alien species, a cargo pilot with gentle hands, and a small crystalline cub to teach her the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest healing comes not from racing toward a solution, but from slowing down enough to understand the problem. And sometimes the person you need to become isn't someone entirely new, but rather a version of yourself that's finally learned to trust both the science and the instinct, both the speed and the stillness, both the brilliant mind and the compassionate heart. As Marcus's hand found hers in the glowing alien night, Keira knew she'd finally found the balance she'd been searching for all along.